Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, my dear brothers and sisters and viewers of IQRA TV. I hope you've had the chance to go and make a tea or coffee or whatever it is that you like to have. As I said last week, it was sharbat. The time for faluda and sharbat is going to go soon. We're going to end up with just having tea and coffee because we all will need some warm drinks very soon with the winter months coming along. We've been having a really interesting discussion about Muslims, the past history of Islam, and where Islam is at this moment in time in global terms. Muhammad Shabir, who's my guest today from Skipton, doesn't live that far away, has traveled around the world and studied in Egypt and many other places. He's learnt the actual Quran itself and what it means, the Arabic real concept of the Quran. So he has enormous knowledge around what Muslims and Islam is all about. So we're having this discussion about where Muslims were, where we are, and where we need to go. He's part of this initiative which is looking at the smart mosque of the future, the masjids of the future, and the smart masjids. And I thought that meant having solar panels and carbon free, which I think is something that we should all be looking at anyway, because as Muslims we have a responsibility not just for ourselves and our families, but for the environment as well. And if we don't look after the environment, we will be questioned on the day of judgment, because we will be equally culpable for the damage that we're causing to the environment if we don't secure it. So let's go back to this discussion we were having. Muslims obviously have gone through a transition over the last few centuries. Islam was a very powerful medium tool to bring people into the world of Islam, showing them what real Islam was all about, and what Islam really meant. And in 500, 600, 700, even 1100 years ago, 700 years ago, people saw Islam as a future for humanity, and people came into the fold of Islam simply because they saw the true nature of Islam and the way it was practiced. Then somewhere along the line we seem to have lost that. And today Muslims and Islam is vilified across the globe. Muslims are seen as the enemies of humanity. Where has that changed taken place?
Where have we gone wrong?
Yeah, why is it that we, who should be the leaders of humanity, we should be the carers of humanity, we should be the ones responsible for our fellow human beings, regardless of whether they're Muslims or not, are now seen as the enemy of humanity? Where, in your opinion, and I'm just asking you for you to share your opinion.
Well, I think
have we gone wrong?
We can be here for weeks and mashallah, there's so much to talk about. But I'll give you an example. I was buying my clothes from a shop in Saltaire, not far from here. And the father and son own this business. And they said to me, Shabir, when are you going to put the flag of Islam on 10 Downing Street? These two white guys. And they're my very old friends. Right. So I said, it was Saturday evening and it was closing time. I said, have we enough time? Because you've touched on the subject. He said, we have. So I said, make a cup of tea and we'll talk. And I said to them, look, I said, I'll give you an example. I said, if I were to buy a second-hand car, and I were to ring somebody, a car that's been advertised, and on the other side, it sounded like a white man, I said, I would go. And this is no disrespect to us, because we have lost it. I said, I will go running and I'll buy that car of a white man. But if it was a Pakistani selling, a Muslim selling, I will think twice before I buy it.
But yeah, I mean,
that's the reality.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
so
I said to him,
if you take that to its level.
Yeah, can I just finish?
Go on.
I then said to him, I said, you guys are living the true Islam. And I see that every day. If we Muslims, our elders did a good job when they were here. They were hardworking, they were honest, they were law-abiding. But the next 2 generations and 3 generations seem to have lost that. And if we were to live Islam, majority of these people in this country, and Allah's perfect or not perfect, look, 100,000 of Brits, white Brits, have become Muslims, and most of them are women. And they're professional, educated, smart people, smart women. So they must have seen something good in it. They're not being forced by anybody to become Muslims. What we haven't done is we haven't been the living ambassadors of Islam. You talk about 400 years or 500 years ago when people would love to know about Islam and become Muslims. Why have we lost that today? It's because we've lost that connection with the Book of Allah and the life of Prophet ﷺ. We have truly...
So are we becoming more materialistic, more interested in the world than in the spirituality?
Well, when we talk about smart masjid,
yeah,
I will tell you what we're becoming.
Right.
And I'll tell you now. Our first priority is a big house, a big car, plenty of money in the bank, designer clothes, designer shoes for ourselves and our children. And also people who have plenty, then they look at the worldly education. We have two of the finest schools in Skipton, the boys' grammar school and the girls' high school. My daughter started this year at the girls' high, and I see Skipton is a small place and there are very few Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
So almost one third of the boys and the girls must be at least 400. And Skipton population is not that much.
Right.
They all go all the way from Bradford and the Burnley, all go to Skipton,
right,
for education. And the mums, driving in their Q7s and BMWs and, Mercedes and delivering these children to school in the morning, and they pick them up almost 25 miles.
Mm-hmm.
A 50-mile trip, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. We are putting so much into the world because we want that big house, we want that big car.
So are you saying we've lost connection with our true reality?
Yeah.
And we've become more worldly orientated and materialistic, and we've lost the spirituality and the true meaning of Islam. But again, let me come back to some of that. I mean, as I say, I've seen young Malaysians, young Indonesians, and even young people from India to a certain extent, who have the best of both worlds. They are very, very successful in their professional careers, whether it's business or professional, but they're also very Islamic in their practice and their living style. Is that a cultural issue? Because you talk about changes back home. In the break we were talking about how our forefathers came here with the intention to make some money and go back, and then obviously for all sorts of different reasons, which we won't go into, never went back. But if I've sort of studied a little bit of Islamic behavior and practices in the Asian subcontinent, and my interpretation, by and large, not generally for everyone, but in some cases, the young people in this country are better Muslims than they are back home. People of the same age.
Well,
their own peers back home are less Islamic in their outlook, their behavior, their practice than young people in this country. And if you see young women, Muslim women in particular in this country, more young Muslim women are wearing the hijab in Britain. These are young Muslim sisters who are the third, fourth generation UK citizens, and they are more proud of their Islamic heritage than their fellow sisters back home in India and Pakistan. I don't know about Bangladesh.
Well,
so what is it? On the one hand, we have some people who see Islam as a valuable religion, which is very personal to them, and they're very proud of it. And back home people don't see that.
I think that you're absolutely right. In Pakistan, India, you will always be that token Muslim, because you're leaving your deen. There's very little risk of that back home. Even though you just name Muslim by name, you don't really understand your deen, because there's no other choices out there. And children have to come back home to their parents at night, and they depend on them by and large. And there's no other, there's nothing on menu.
So are you saying that here, they are forced into staying?
Forced into staying Islam, into Islam. And I agree with you entirely. I spend a lot of time in Pakistan, and I've been to India, and I know a lot of Bangladeshis here, and I talk to them about back home. So all these countries are absolutely, you're right. There's an exception here, as a lot of people who are close to the deen, mashallah, they're much better, because they realize that they're at risk of losing everything here. See, people realize back home, when you say whatever poor Muslims you are, you're going to remain that. You probably go into your grave still believing in Shahada. Here, we have tens of thousands of our children, our youth, leaving Islam. Bradford alone, there's been research that every year 3,500 children, our youth, leave Islam. Bradford alone. It's a big place, Bradford.
It is a huge, that's what I'm saying.
Now I'll tell you that I have been doing research on this all over Europe.
Let me just make sure I've heard what you've said.
Yeah.
In Bradford, on average, around 3,000 young people are leaving Islam.
Every year.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right.
That's a huge number.
How do you,
Well,
where do you measure that? How do you find that out?
This is it's an organization of new Muslims called IQRA,
right.
Islamic Research and Education Foundation.
Right.
And they
that's in Bradford alone?
In Bradford alone. And in Europe,
this is a real...
Their research tells them, in Europe, 250,000 people are leaving Islam. And you know what? There's a research this has been done by another Islamic organization, which says that out of every 5 young Muslims, 2 openly refute and say there's no God, we don't believe in Allah.
So they become atheist.
Atheist, agnostic, atheist.
Why are they thinking like that? What is driving them to go against?
This is what's got me going to start this Smart Masjid project, because I've spent time and put a lot of effort into it as to where it happens and why it happens. And I'll spell it out to you. When a child goes into masjid the first day, age of 4 or 5, and I've seen countless examples with my own eyes, that first day the child comes to masjid and he's had a brutal experience. You know, and I'll give you an example.
That's generalizing, aren't you? I mean, I'm sure there's lots of
there's
lots
always
of madrasas where
always
children are treated very well, and
I mean, if we talk, we can talk about a lot of masajid that are already smart masajid. There's so many.
What is your definition of a smart masajid? I mean, we talked about this a few times. We've used that word a few times.
Well,
what is a smart masajid?
The definition of smart masajid.
I said to you, smart masajid is,
well,
carbon neutral.
we're talking about we have an eco mosque that's being built in Cambridge right now,
yes,
which is the latest technology and everything. That to me is not my version of smart masjid.
So what is your version of smart masjid?
My version of smart masjid is that we've got enough smart buildings. We have beautiful buildings world over, and especially in the UK, we have masajid that we've spent tens of millions of pounds. There's some from a small house to a massive, massive complex. We've invested enough in buildings. And some of these buildings, we've invested up to 10 million on a building, but we're not prepared to invest even 10,000 on education of our children. We pay our imams, our madrasa teachers so poorly. We expect them to deliver miracles on £100 a week. That's how sad our communities. I'm not saying everywhere is the same. There's exceptions to the rule. I've found some amazing masajid within this country. So I give the poor performing an example that if so-and-so can do it, why can't you?
But is that because the community is not willing to put their hands in their pockets?
Community is.
Is it?
I tell you something, that if that is that same community that's raising 10 million for the masjid, for the building, but somewhere the thinking is messed up. That when it comes to the building, we can collect the money, we can work hard and get money and put the building up. But when the building's up, that's it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're not willing to put their hands in their pocket, right? They'll make the masjid, they'll make the building, but the stuff that goes along with it, the spiritual aspect.
I will add a little bit to it. I think that people who are in charge of the masjid, they just give up. Right. If they were going with same vigor, that now we've got the building, we've got to deliver the services. You see, a masjid is basically to deliver all the beautiful quality services for its community, to empower them. Empower them spiritually.
I know, for example, where there are people running madrasas, where they charge a nominal fee for the madrasa, £5, £4.
That is changing now, alhamdulillah.
Now, if they put the fee up by 50p, there's a huge outcry. So like you say, they'll spend 50 miles, travel 50 miles to get a good education, but they're unwilling to pay 50p extra
for the Islamic education.
Exactly.
Well,
so have we got our priorities wrong?
I think that majority of us, we've got our priorities wrong.
Right.
And there's also there's a dialogue and an argument that whose responsibility is it to nurture, to educate, to promote good quality Muslims? Is it parents' responsibility? Is it masjid's responsibility? Is it community initiative? To me, we've got to look at who is best placed to provide this.
Right.
The parents for 3 generations, didn't have the nurturing, they didn't have the tarbiyah, so they don't have it. Today's parents, they're biologically old enough to produce children, but to give tarbiyah, they don't have it themselves. So they can't do it. So I stopped looking at parents. Okay, even though I educate parents, but masjid is where few, the people from the society, the ones who have it, they should get together. And we have prepared a business,
if I was to show you
a masjid plan.
If I was to show you communities where that is not the case, where the parents themselves are very, very spiritually strong.
I know some as well.
Yeah.
But there's only very few of them.
Right. So again, I'm just saying, is that a cultural issue? Is that in certain cultural and communities, or is it a general? I mean, if you go to Old Trafford, for example, in Old Trafford itself, around Ayers Road, there's a community there.
I know that community very well.
There's a Somali community. There's an Indian community, where Nur al-Islam has got some fantastic outcomes.
Is a shining example.
It's a fantastic outcomes in terms of how spiritually young people are engaged in the activities of Islam and the masjid. You go outside that area into other parts of Manchester, where you'll see a completely different
I work with 4 masajids in Manchester, and and Nur al-Islam is one of them. This 5th. One is Chidal Masjid. Again, a shining example. Any service you can think of, they provide for the youth, elderly, children. Khidra Masjid on Cheetham Hill is another one. That's 2. Nur al-Islam is 3. And then you have Makki Masjid, which is being redeveloped and built. Now they actually have agreed with me for them to become first role model smart masjid, because they're building a new masjid.
Let me come back to this smart masjid. I mean, we talked about, you talk about smart masjid. What is reality? What is a smart masjid in your opinion?
A smart masjid
What is it? Is it sort of beautiful? Is it
no, it's not. It's got nothing to do with buildings.
Right, so what is it?
It's to produce beautiful Muslims.
And how do they do that?
And how they do that? By nurturing from very young age, bringing on the parents on board. And one of the key game changer is that you've got to develop a education department in the masjid to deliver Islamic education.
Right.
And that, sadly, majority of ulama can teach Quran.
The
imams can teach the Quran, but they're not equipped to deliver the education because they're not educationists. So sometimes we expect too much from our imams. And also, sadly, some masjid will give imam 100 kids, just one teacher. Over 2 hours, that's impossible. So, and we're not paying them properly as well, so their mind's not on the job. So I think that we really got to take this education in the masjid very seriously. This is one of the things that drove me, and I'll give you an example here. A child enters the masjid at the age of 4 or 5, leaves at 16 and 18, and in majority of the cases, there's always exception to the rule. In the majority of the cases, you ask that child at the age of 16 and 18, what have you learned? And he will have only learned how to read Quran, and that a Mickey Mouse type, not very good at all, because I know my Quran was Mickey Mouse. And then what else has he learned? Maybe he can read, pray, he can pray Salah, and he knows a few du'as. That is it. 10,000 hours it adds up to, Brother Iqbal.
Right.
And that's enough to do a specialization in anything. But what we deliver in those 10 years, 12 years? Virtually nothing.
So we don't inculcate their spiritual aspect of their life.
We have no nurturing, because age of nurturing is from birth to 7. Then from 7, we also kill the genius.
So
in
are
that
you
child.
saying the parents' expectations are that you have a child, you brought a child into this world, at the age of 5, they absolve themselves of their responsibility, pass it on to the masjid and imam, and say, there you are, here's my child, now make him into a better Muslim.
At best, parents' expectations are very, very low.
Right.
At worst, they get rid of him for a couple hours so they can do what they want to do. This is very sad reality. Wherever, because I've been involved in teaching, I taught for a whole year to see for myself, to get into those little minds as to what ticks them, what creates the love of learning. And in those 10 months, I did 2 years course work, curriculum. We covered it in 10 weeks because they were willing learners, they were on board, their hearts and minds were with me, and they did it in no time. So then I realized that it can be done. 1 hour a day, that's all it were. And I think that it's very important that, that there's age for nurturing, And because in those 3-4 years, sometimes I've seen some children just learn alif ba ta, just finish that Nurani Qaida. It takes 3 years. And in those 3 years, the genius is dead. That child is so bored because he's just whole hour, he's sitting there learning two letters.
Let me just ask you a question. In order for a 5-year-old child to learn the basics of Islam, how to read the Quran,
Yeah.
we don't expect a 5-year-old child to go into school, primary school, not knowing A, B, C and a few sentences.
Yeah, yeah.
Yet, do we expect the child to go into madrasa and then pick up alif ba ta sa, having not done any work in the house? So
Yeah.
are we now saying
Yeah.
that the parents themselves are not sufficiently knowledgeable or qualified or have the ability to
And
teach
not
their
even have the
children?
will to do it sometimes.
So
You
that is a damning indictment of
It is
our
a
young
damning.
people.
It is damning, and I'll tell you something, that a lot of children, when they go to school, even our children are low achievers in school as well, because our children go against the other children who have actually all the basics when they go to school. Our children go and start very low.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the low achievers in schools as well. This is why when I work with our children, career counseling, we find that that at the age of 7 or 8, which are basics and given, they're not there. And the parents, you see, in my 1 year, I realized I taught 2 classes of 35, from 5 to 12.
That's a huge number.
Age of 5 to 12 and 12 to 22. And in those, there were a number of children who were doing amazingly well, even before I started.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked, the reason behind that, the parents were active at home. They had good
Right.
parenting. They had parents who were involved. So 2 of the game changers in the education of a child in masjid, number 1 is active parents, and I found some masajid who do an amazing job on that, who bring parents on board in an amazing way. So we found some best practices that we want to share with all the masajid. That's another initiative of Smart Masjid.
Right.
Secondly, the most important thing when a child learns in the masjid, the person who greets that child has got to know the culture and the language of that child. In most cases, that doesn't happen.
I mean, obviously, that is a huge, we've discussed this before, that one of the shortfalls of this community is, particularly, I'm sorry to say this, within the Pakistani community,
Yeah.
that the imams are not able to communicate because the language is a barrier. I mean, obviously, I agree with a lot of what you say. I think my brothers and sisters and viewers of IQRA TV who've been watching this program will probably agree with the majority of the discussion that we've had. And obviously, one of the biggest shocks of the evening for me has been your figure of 3,500 people, young people in Bradford, who are leaving Islam every year. I mean, that to me is a shocking fact that I've learned. We need to redress that. Brothers and sisters, I've just been told we've only got 30 seconds. This issue needs a further discussion. It's a serious indictment on our Muslim community. We need to discuss this openly, honestly, and be brave in the discussions that we have. We need to make sure that we safeguard our Muslim children of the future, and much more importantly, Islam in this country. I'm sorry, we're going to have to go. We'll come back to this someday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah guide you, be with you, and take care of you. And may you make du'as for me as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.